This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour
with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head
on your home of the Gamecocks in Columbia.
107.5 The Game
On 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach and 100.5
The Game in Florence.
Welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Tyler, Wes, and Chris, along with you on this Wednesday morning. I had this debate with Colin earlier. We are halfway through the week, but do we say we're halfway through the bye week, or is that not until Saturday when you're actually halfway through playing till you get to play your next game against Florida?
Halfway through the week.
So we're officially halfway through the bye week.
I would say even more, actually, if we want to really get into the weeds, Tyler.
I mean, if you want to give like percentages, we're like 55% of the way through the week or something.
Well, and I say that because the schedule changed up this week. So normally,
that's true.
Game week, you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practice.
Yes.
Friday walkthrough, Saturday game. Bye week, Shane Beamer changed it up. So they've got, instead of their day off being Monday, they have Monday, Tuesday practice, today practice.
Yep.
Then they'll have some days off. Everybody gets some R&R. Lots of guys in the treatment room, obviously.
Definitely.
And then you get back at it next week, and Tuesday will be your first, Florida prep practice. So, really, they're almost done this week with practice, basically. So, I'd say they're a little bit farther along even through the bye week.
Yeah, and I think the big thing with bye weeks is just, I think it's two things. Bringing along your young guys, and maybe you get them a few extra reps. You know, we keep hearing, obviously it's a huge discussion, wide receivers, and, people are begging for more Nick Harbor, and, Beamer's talked about, hey, we need more from the wide receivers. And so I think you can bring guys along a little bit quicker during a bye week because of the fact that you're not preparing for an opponent. The other part of it is just the obvious, and that's to get guys healthy. Sit guys as much as possible. We talked about it yesterday. It maybe isn't your guys that are sort of more long-term. You're not going to just magically wave a wand and then be ready to go. But I think your guys that are playing through stuff, which is kind of everybody to an extent right now, you can really use this week to kind of refresh. And then just having Thursday, Friday, Saturday off, I think is a good mental break as well, considering the opponents that South Carolina played through 5 games and how tough this schedule was. And you're sitting there 2-3. The fans are kind of bearing down on you a little bit now. And, people have forgotten that South Carolina started slow the last 2 seasons and turned it around. So I think for just a mental reset can be very, very beneficial as well.
It's also beneficial. You have your bye week this week. Florida does not. Of course, Florida always takes his bye week the week before the Georgia game. So you get the opportunity to watch them this weekend, see them take on a Vanderbilt team. They'll most likely win that game. So I don't think they're in danger of an upset or anything like that. But learn a little bit more about Florida, a team that's been pretty up and down this season. Again, they lose to Utah. They beat Tennessee pretty handily and then get waxed by Kentucky this past weekend. So kind of in a similar way, these two teams very similar in the fact that you don't know everything about what they can be, as they've been kind of up and down through the first 5 games of the year.
Are we sure, Tyler, they're not on upset alert?
Do you think they are?
Look what happened last season.
That's true.
Vanderbilt won that football game. I mean, now Florida wasn't a great team, but they're not a great team this year. I mean,
I think they're better than they were.
We're still
a year
figuring
ago.
it out.
Sure,
but we know they're not at the bare minimum. They're inconsistent.
Yeah,
Vandy. I mean, are they about the same as last year? I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns about this team. I don't know. Commodores won last year's game by 7 points. Florida had a first-round quarterback at their disposal last year, as up and down as he was. I don't know.
Vandy ain't winning this game.
I would have said the same last year.
But I think at Florida,
true.
No Ray Davis for Vandy anymore.
That's true. True. That makes a big difference.
I don't see it. Obviously anything can happen week to week. If they play 10 times, Florida's winning 9 of them. Even though I'm not
9.5.
I don't think Florida's all that good, but they're beating Vandy.
Well,
I think.
And a big part of that you mentioned, it's in the swamp this year. Obviously, Billy Napier, Florida teams have struggled on the road these past couple of seasons, which makes you feel a little bit better about them coming into Williams-Brice Stadium next weekend. But yeah, being in the swamp, that certainly leans more in their favor. And I don't think they'll have a problem with Vandy. Maybe it's close going into like the fourth quarter, but I think Florida has enough pieces to pick up the win this weekend.
I was being a little contrarian. I would definitely pick Florida.
Well, you know what?
win.
There's nothing wrong with playing devil's advocate.
But I don't go in. Oh yeah, no issues whatsoever. Like I've seen. I think this Florida team has had enough question marks to where you reasonably could say it's not slam dunk. Yeah, I agree. Being in the swamp, tough base to play. I give them the nod, and I give them the nod pretty comfortably. But if they have some struggles, some bad moments, I wouldn't be surprised. Here's an interesting stat. Speaking of Florida, this comes from David Soderquist on Twitter or on X, excuse me, and our guy Nick De La Torre from the Florida On 3 site has kind of come along and added some context. But Florida has struggled rushing the ball against FBS opponents, which is weird because that's kind of their strength offensively, right? Kind of taking care of the football. Got 2 really good backs, including ETN. They're 110th nationally in rushing yards per game against FBS opponents, just 100.3 yards per game.
Well, I think they're dealing with what a lot of people are dealing with right now, what we're seeing right down the road here. Offensive line play, it's a struggle. And we're also kind of to tie all this together. I feel like we're kind of seeing, too, that what happened in a game last year, there's like very little carryover from year to year, even if it's the same teams. Some of that is just every game, as Steve Spurrier would say, stands on its own merit. Some of that is you have so much turnover these days as far as rosters go and transfers and all this stuff. And I'm still kind of kicking myself because I said coming into the year that when I was kind of saying preseason what picks I was going to make, I kind of had this feeling that South Carolina loses at Tennessee year 1, beats Tennessee at home year 2, and that they were going to lose to Tennessee, even after destroying them last year, that they were going to lose to Tennessee in Knoxville. Well, Florida, it could be the exact opposite, where you beat Florida at home handily. They beat you last year in Florida handily, and now Florida comes to Columbia next week. And I do think this game sets up pretty well for South Carolina, even with everything we've seen in South Carolina's 3 losses, because if Florida can't run the football, they're going to struggle to score points. The numbers tell you, South Carolina can't stop the run. I don't think Florida, and we'll obviously get into this next week. We're getting ahead of ourselves. But Florida, I don't think, has a schematic advantage like Tennessee has. Tennessee's scheme plus their speed at running back made that a very tough matchup for South Carolina, because even when you had them bottled up, they were still able to break off long runs. I don't know if Florida has that up front, and I don't know if they have that schematically. So coming to Willie B, I think, is a huge difference as well compared to going to Knoxville last week. So I think we tend to look at what we saw the week before and bring that forward to the next game. We tend to look at what we saw last year when the 2 teams played and bring that forward to this year. There's very little that you can actually take away in terms of outcome from week to week or year to year because there's so many different variables.
Obviously going to keep an eye on Florida this weekend against Vanderbilt, 4 o'clock on the SEC Network. Good slate of games around the conference. Which one of these sticks out the most to you guys? Going to be most excited to check out this weekend?
So obviously we'll watch Florida just because, like, I don't think that's ever a game that you are circling. Nobody ever circled Florida Vandy and was like, that's can't miss, must watch, gotta see it TV. But, you know, I think if you're doing your due diligence, you'll watch some of Florida just to get a better idea of what they're going to do. And obviously, scouting report. And you get to see Vandy at the same time. That's a team you play later on. Personally, I'm going outside of the conference at the noon slot. Oklahoma, Texas, both undefeated.
It's not completely outside the conference.
Well, yeah.
Greg Sankey will be there.
Good point. It in 1 year it won't be outside the conference. So combined 10-0, combined 4-0 in the Big 12. That'll be interesting. Second TV will probably be Missouri getting exposed by LSU at noon.
Calling out Drinkwitz.
You know, Alabama A&M will be maybe interesting, but I actually think Alabama wins that. Later on in the day, I'll tell you the game I'm most interested in seeing other than Braves Game 1 of the division series.
Yeah,
of course.
Kentucky, Georgia.
Yeah.
I actually wish this was in Kentucky because if it was in Kentucky, I would actually probably maybe pick the upset. But being in Athens is tough.
This is either going to be a 4-quarter slugfest or Georgia's just finally going to blow somebody out. I don't think it's going to be anything
That's
in between.
where my head is at. Like, they are going to be sweating bullets, possibly even get upset, or they're going to win by 4 touchdowns or something like that. I have the exact same feeling. I don't know why.
I don't know what it is about these past couple of Georgia teams these past couple of years. They just seem to play up to competition when you bring in like a ranked opponent. And like they shut out Arkansas a couple years ago at home and didn't let them get past like the 50 for 3.5 quarters. Like something about bringing in a ranked team on a Saturday night might be a blackout game as well. Like I just feel like this is fine when Georgia turns the wick up for once.
Well, and I think we're all trying to figure out, all right, we're now 5 games into the season. So we're all kind of like, all right, is Georgia what we're seeing right now, which hasn't really been that impressive. They're still 5-0, don't get me wrong, but we grade them on a curve because the expectation is they just won.
Of course.
You know, anybody else is sitting there 5-0, they're like, oh yeah, you know, national title. But they've won it 2 years in a row, so you kind of have extremely high expectations for them. They just have not played that well. They haven't played, I feel like, 4 quarters of football. They haven't been dominant defensively the way you kind of expect. And so we're like, all right, are they just on a 2-year hangover, basically, where they haven't, even though they've been threatened, they don't feel like they've been threatened yet. Like, I don't know. Or are we just a little bit off? Like, are they just not quite as good as they have been? And, you know, that opens the window for somebody. If they keep doing what they've been doing, they're going to get knocked off by somebody in SEC play eventually.
So Colin and I talked about this in the 9 o'clock hour. If you had to set your Final Four right now, would Georgia be in it, and would they be number 1? I had them in it. I didn't have them at number 1.
Well, then we get into, all right, how do you pick is it the best? Who's the best team? Who's done the best? Who has the best resume? You can't really decide at this point because there's so much data left. I have them in.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're 1. But then there's an argument.
3.
You can make an argument, though, like they're 1 until they're not.
That's true. They get the benefit of the doubt. But I think Texas is shown to be a little bit more of a complete team right now. Michigan's gone out there and dominated everyone the way they're supposed to. Yep. Florida State's obviously looked really good. And again, Georgia, I think, is one of the best 4 teams in the country, but I don't think they're playing the dominant brand of football that maybe we expected them to play through 4 weeks.
There's some teams out west that we kind of, I think, forget. I mean, Washington, they're really good. Oregon, they're really good. Southern Cal's defense is, I think all of us could put together a team and score a few points, but probably couldn't stop them, right? They're really good on offense. They're very suspect on defense. I think everybody has some warts.
Sure. And I think the Pac-12 is set to cannibalize itself once again with a bunch of one-loss teams that ultimately prevents everybody from maybe getting into the playoff.
Sure.
One of those teams has got to get in, I feel like.
Like you would think.
But I mean, dude, Ohio State is just quietly sitting there at number 4,
but even they're
undefeated
not
as
like
well.
playing up to the standard that I think we hold Ohio State to. They're winning, but it's not like dominant wins like we usually see them have.
The decider will be which of these teams, be it Georgia, Ohio State. Oklahoma has got a chance to completely disrupt things.
And nobody's
this
talking
week.
about Oklahoma. Everybody's talking about Texas. They're flying under the radar.
Yes,
Dylan Gabriel having a great season so far.
15 touchdowns, 2 picks so far. That will be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, we're going to start to find out a lot this weekend, I think.
Talk plenty more about the matchups coming up this weekend, but I saw something yesterday that was a nice, pleasant surprise. A certain Gamecock potentially jumping himself in the first-round conversation. Hit that coming up. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on a Wednesday here on the game.
He's going to throw it. It's a fake, and he's got Leggett. Left side, caught to 50. Xavier on his feet at the 40 and out of bounds at the Tennessee sideline. How do you let Xavier Leggett open on a fake punt? Tennessee, can you read? Can you see? He leads the nation. That's 32 yards, and all Kai Kroger does is throw completions.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Todd Ellis on the call on Saturday night for the Gamecocks Radio Network. Kai Kroger to Xavier Leggett on one of the few highlights, unfortunately, for the Gamecocks of that fake punt going for 32 yards. And I play that because yesterday Pro Football Focus put out its latest mock draft projections for next spring's NFL draft. Xavier Leggett making his way into the first round as pick number 32. And you look at his overall scores from Pro Football Focus through 5 games this year, averaging 70.58. Best performance in week number 1 against North Carolina at 85.4. His worst performance was actually this past weekend against Tennessee at 56.2. When you talk about PFF grades, if you're above 70, doing pretty good. And Xavier Leggett consistently performing well this season by their standards.
Yeah, he's been awesome. And I thought that was an interesting question posed by Todd. How do you allow him to get that open?
Well, for the rest of the night, they did not.
Well, for one, I think beautiful design by Pete Limbo on that. That's something they had in dating back to last year against Tennessee that they had seen they liked. And, two, nobody's necessarily expecting you to dial it up, backed up on your own goal line. And also it helps that Leggett is a gunner on your punt team running down there every play anyway. So
it's not odd to see him out there.
It doesn't raise red flags to see 17 out there. And then they actually put in, if you're a defender, you would call it a pick. If you're an offensive guy, you would call it a rub. They basically ran a wheel route on a punt with a rub play from the outside, quote, receiver for South Carolina, with Leggett starting out inside. I think that was maybe Kilgore?
It was Kilgore.
Yeah, so that thing was very well designed. And then just the fact you have a punter that you trust to throw the ball that far down the field in that situation. If more teams had punters that could throw, more teams should honestly do that. Like, I can't tell you how many times, if you really watch on punts, how often the gunner just kind of gets a free release down the field. If you had the guts to dial it up more, more teams could hit that.
That's why teams don't. They don't have the guts to call it, frankly.
And you don't have a quarterback or a punter who is a quarterback.
Yeah.
Still perfect.
And Shane Beamer pointed out that actually, Wes, that Kilgore, it was an option to throw him that ball if Xavier Leggett was covered, which he was not really covered at all. But, he's been an absolute terror as a punt gunner. He's getting down the field, making things happen. I think he got down there so fast, and I think he missed a tackle technically as a punt gunner. I think it was in that game, but he got a piece of the guy and slowed him down, and so the other guys were able to clean it up. But he's been flying down there all year. But, that illustrates, though, his value to NFL teams. If you follow Jim Nagy who runs the Senior Bowl, he sent out something on social media the other day that was a clip of a guy who was a wide receiver who had bought into special teams and had been able to hang around the league for a long time, in part because of his willingness to play special teams and how adept he was at it. And when you look at Leggett, he's a guy that's now put on tape that he's willing to do that. He's going to get great reviews from Shane Beamer and Pete Limbo and Luke Day and everybody in the program. They're all going to Justin Stepp. They're all going to talk about his work ethic, his willingness to do all those different things.
Absolutely. And coming into the season, we obviously a lot of people talking about Juice Wells and his potential to be one of those higher drafted wide receivers. Obviously, he's not gotten to play a whole lot this year. So Xavier Legette, stepping into the role of wide receiver number one and going to this past weekend was obviously leading the NCAA in overall receiving yards. Only had 50 on the day against Tennessee, so falling back down that list a little bit. But yeah, he's made the most of his situation so far, and if he continues to play at this clip, should get his name called pretty early in the spring next year.
Well, NFL teams obviously want guys that are tall, 220 pounds, can run, can make plays on 50-50 balls, can be a run-after-the-catch guy, can play on special teams. But they also want workers, and they want guys that they don't have to worry about that aspect. Hey, am I going to have to worry about, hey, where is this guy? Why is he not in the building? Why is he the first to leave? All those things, if you're going to invest in a high draft pick, I think all those things absolutely matter. And just having some versatility and being like, all right, you only have limited spots in the NFL, so who can play multiple roles? And I think Legette is that guy. So if he can keep it going, certainly I'll be very curious to see where he lands. I think conservatively you're talking top 3 rounds. Getting into the first round itself, it's a whole nother animal. And you're talking about just the nitpicking when it comes to, is a guy a first rounder versus second rounder. They're going to kind of pick you apart as far as that goes. But I'm happy for him. He's obviously worked his tail off to get there. And, let's talk about the fact he's stepped up when he's absolutely had to. And, it's just been very impressive to watch. We'll see if he can keep it going the rest of the way. I certainly think he can, but also he would get some help if some other receivers could kind of take a little bit of that pressure off of him as well.
Well, and that's a big thing to, people are talking about for this bye week for South Carolina, and Shane Beamer even mentioned it, getting other receivers to step up. And we've obviously seen flashes, from Emeka Blake, from Luke Doty, Tyshawn Russell, get another catch on Saturday night. Like, we see the potential in these guys to take that next step. What they're able to do in this week off, we don't know. We certainly would like, as long as Juice Wells is out and not able to play, somebody else to really get a solid foundation as a number 2 guy on this offense. We just have not quite seen that as of yet.
Who is South Carolina's second leading receiver in terms of receptions? If I asked you, if you've already looked it up, don't say. But if you haven't, what would y'all guess just based on what we've seen?
If I haven't, I'd probably say Trey Knox.
Yeah, I was thinking Trey too.
Never mind. Y'all completely ruined my point.
Uh-oh.
It was Trey Knox. I thought it would be a little bit like...
I would have maybe guessed Emeka Blake, too. He was the leading receiver against Georgia.
Yeah, and this, to be clear, we're talking... Actually, you know what? We're talking receptions and yards. So, yeah, Trey Knox was 17. Third on the team, DK Joyner with 14.
Really? Wow.
So,
those kind of go a little bit unnoticed because they're so quick, dump off screens, that kind of stuff. Like, you don't always think of those necessarily as receptions, but shows up in the stat book, obviously.
Yeah, it does. And I thought Trey kind of quietly, because South Carolina lost the game, it got maybe missed a little bit. Trey quietly had one of his more productive games against Tennessee, which, I think was good to see. So Legette right now, 32 catches, 606 yards, 3 touchdowns, including a long of 76, 18.9 yards per catch. So, but yeah, you kind of, I would like to see a healthy AB start to take over as this year progresses.
Who's 4 and 5 on that list, if you have it?
4 is AB, 11 for 133. 5 is
that's through only really 2 complete games for AB.
Right.
Yeah, but dude, he was like, he was on his way.
He was humming for the first week and a half, and gets hurt against Furman, obviously.
And I had even, until you said it, I had completely forgotten the long catch and run against Tennessee. He did have the one. It was on a screen, kind of misdirection screen where they rolled it one way and threw back the other. That was a beautiful play.
Making him miss tackles.
Yeah, and he can do that for you. So I think that's been another probably underrated loss that he's been either out or not 100%. Another great takeaway from that. Did y'all see how fast Gargiulo was running down the field trying to find somebody to hit?
Oh, yeah.
My man
motoring.
was hauling.
That's what you love to see.
And actually, Chris, Doty and Blake are tied for 5th, both with 10 catches.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have a guy that has only played as good of a start as he had.
Mm-hmm.
He's only really played in a couple games. You can't have that guy be like your next leading receiver out of the receiver room.
Right. Absolutely. And we certainly hope to see that wide receiving come along over these next couple weeks once they get back in action against Florida next week. Coming up, though, Chris is fired up. He has an opinion. He wants to let these people hear it. To paraphrase Mr. Costanza, I've got a lot of problems. You're going to hear about it. That's coming up. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on a Wednesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris, along with you in the Herndon Chevrolet studios. We all know Chris to be very mild-mannered, very level-headed. But he informed me before the show today, he's got something on his mind he wants to rant about. Chris?
Rant was
floor is
probably
yours.
That was probably a strong word.
Oh, I'm hyping it up for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
But did you just overhype? Now I feel like
No,
Chris has a lot to live up to
I
here.
think I literally used the word rant in a text
When you
message
use
to
the
Tyler.
word rant,
Yeah.
it has certain connotations to it.
we-
What is on your mind? What is bugging you today that you feel the need to get off
Can
your
we play
chest?
some background music for this? I feel like we need like some Eminem or something to
Oh,
get
something kind of dramatic. A little
Yeah.
lose yourself.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to play that? I don't know.
We play the instrumental.
There you go. Here's what's on my mind, guys. And if you've said this, I love you. And I'm honest. No, there's no but. Well, but I don't agree. Yeah. I love you, and you're entitled to that opinion. And if you disagree with me, which you might, drop us a note. Firehouse Subs text line, 803-446-100. Here's what I want to bring up. 2 words. Win anyway. Have y'all seen this season? Have y'all heard it? Wes, have you seen it?
A little bit.
On social media? Have you seen it on the Insiders Forum? Tyler may have seen it in the Firehouse Subs text line or on the phones. Win anyway. The notion that, and this was popularized, right? 2011, Ray Tanner, great baseball coach at South Carolina, now the AD. Their second trip to Omaha, second straight, second of 3 consecutive trips. Ultimately, their second national title. And that team dealt with some things. They dealt with injuries. They dealt with, as usual in SEC baseball, an extremely difficult schedule. They dealt with Clemson. They dealt with some crazy situations in games that happened to them that they were frequently able to get out of. And yet they won, and they won anyway. And so Ray Tanner utilized this phrase, win anyway, and it was not the first time he had used it. He used it a lot throughout his career, but this kind of popularized it. It put it in the Gamecock fan lexicon. It was canonized. It's in the Gamecock dictionary, win anyway. And so now, Wes, every time we've seen a team face adversity, and this could be baseball, basketball, women's basketball, football, and they've faced some type of perceived adversity and won a game, it's, hey, win anyway. They won anyway. But I think what that did, actually, is it set this precedent, kind of. Like, those teams were unprecedented. That is not normal in college athletics, in case anybody didn't know, to go to 3 straight College World Series. That is so hard. It's hard to get there once. Twice. They made it 3 times. They won twice. They made it to the championship series a 3rd time. And that unprecedented run kind of set this precedent to where now people say, well, hey, you remember that team, 10 years ago? They had adversity, and they just won anyway. And I think it's almost become a little bit dangerous because when we see teams sometimes here, or maybe you have a pro team that you go for, but when we see teams here that have gone through some struggles or injuries, whatever, tough schedule, there is, I think, a propensity for some people to kind of just say, just win anyway. Look at that team. Look at what they did. And you just say win anyway. I think there's a line between excuses, but there's also just saying win anyway and kind of ignoring the reality of where things are. Does that make sense? Am I off base?
No, I mean, yeah, I think win anyway is a rallying cry for a team and for a coach, but ultimately those are your starters for a reason. So I think what South Carolina has faced with is the lack of depth gets exposed when you have injuries, particularly to some of your better players. And so it is hard in this league, and it's not an excuse, but if we didn't talk about why South Carolina won or lost the games, then we wouldn't have a radio show because we would just sit here in silence. So it's like, I kind of align it with people that get upset with what Beamer says in his post-game press conferences. I'm like, well, what is he supposed to say? Yeah. He's telling you why they lost as a broken record. What is he supposed to say? He's telling you why. If you lose a game, I've learned there's nothing a coach can say that actually will be accepted by some people because you lost the game.
Some people want to hear, I'm terrible, I did the worst coaching job ever, and I'm considering firing everybody.
Or they think they want to hear that.
They think they want to hear that.
If you hear that, what are you going? You're going to be like,
this guy's
what the?
Biff Poggi from Charlotte has his press conference after their game against, I think, Georgia State. Comes in the next week before they're about to play Florida for his weekly preview press conference, and people are like, "All right, so what changes are you making?" He's like, I didn't really mean I was firing all the staff. I just meant we had to look at things, So even when they say that,
I don't know what the press conferences, post game, Tuesday thing. That when you're winning, you can say whatever you want, and it's cool. When you're not winning, nothing you can say can really make anyone happy. I feel like because even if you say, well, we need to do this, and this moving forward, then it's, well, why didn't you do that before? What are you waiting on?
Right.
And also, I do have a little bit of a pet peeve of mine here. The Mario Anderson discussion. So, I agree. Mario Anderson has earned his touches moving forward, but you also are not going to play the same running back for the entirety of a football game either. Like you're going to rotate.
Yeah.
So this thing of why is this guy in? Why is that guy in? And I'm not talking about the people who specifically have said, well, why is your smallest running back in on 3rd and 1? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when there's any running back in the game other than Mario Anderson. It's why is there a different? Well, you have to rotate guys.
Not playing 70 snaps.
I did think it was pretty telling, and I had these pulled up yesterday. I don't have them in front of me right now, but we didn't get to it. The fact Tennessee, so James Pierce, Tennessee's excellent pass rusher, not even a starter for them. He's not a starter. He played 30-something snaps in the game. The guy who started in front of him played 30-something snaps. They rotated, I think, about 12 deep on their front four. And, and South Carolina rotates fairly deep on their front four as well, but I don't know, particularly at kind of edge, Carolina doesn't have a guy coming off the bench to get 9 pressures.
Right.
So I think we've kind of, you look at South Carolina kind of wearing down as the game went on. I think they had given up 80-something yards rushing at the half, which, that's fine against Tennessee.
Yeah.
And the number ends up being 260 or whatever, 268, I think. But, depth is something that ultimately comes back to recruiting, development. You have to be at a place long enough to build depth, I think. And that's when, hey, you can lose a couple of guys and probably be fine. But to take Chris's normal phrase, when your margin for error is that tiny, then, it hurts you when you lose guys.
All right, that is Chris's rant. We'll let him cool down and catch his breath during the break. MLB postseason underway. A couple Gamecocks in some key games yesterday. We'll highlight some of those coming up. You're listening to Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
3-2 in the hole. Bohm is over there. He will flip to first, and the Phillies will win game 1, 4-1.
Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. That was the call last night on ESPN. Phillies picking up the 4-1 win over the Marlins in the NL wildcard game number 1. Of course, the winner of that series set to take on the Braves in game 1 of the NLDS this upcoming Saturday. But yesterday was day 1 of the MLB postseason. 8 teams in action, 2 from the AL, or 4 from the AL, 4 from the NL. A couple Gamecocks making some pretty significant impacts on day number 1 of MLB's postseason. You, of course, have with the Texas Rangers, you have Jordan Montgomery went out there for 7 innings, 6 hits, 0 earned runs, 5 strikeouts, and no walks en route to the Rangers' 4-0 victory over the Rays last night in a less than full Tropicana Field.
Man, that's sad. The Rays are one of the most well-run organizations in terms of getting more out of less as far as the amount of money they spend than any throughout sports.
Sure.
And you look at the atmosphere in Philadelphia, the atmosphere in Minnesota, and then compare it to that. It's just sad.
It's like playing baseball in an airplane hangar.
Yeah, it's not fun, not cool. And then Tampa was playing. They played defense like I'm used to seeing in the City of Columbia Beer League Sunday softball co-ed league that I play in. They're out there throwing the ball around.
You're not going to win too many postseason games with 4 errors.
Yeah, no, that was ugly, man, right off the jump there. But Jordan Montgomery, awesome. You don't see pitchers go 7 innings, especially in the playoffs anymore. He does. He was fantastic. He was, getting off the mound, making diving catches over there. He made another pretty, I would say, underrated play where he fielded a bunt and fired to first base, to get the runner. That was just what the Rangers needed because they've had some really big injuries to their pitching staff, and so that kind of rolled him into the number 1 slot. He stepped up, and now Tampa, which at one point this year was the best team in baseball, now they're facing elimination.
Whit Merrifield got 1 at bat for the Jays yesterday. Goes 0 for 1 out there in a pinch hit situation late in that game as they fall to Minnesota 3-1. On the NL side of things, Christian Walker, a very good game for the Diamondbacks, going 3 of 4 with a couple of key RBIs to help lead the Diamondbacks to that 6-3 win over Milwaukee in game 1 of that NL wildcard.
So y'all know how they have StatCast that can show you anything and everything. Talking to Tommy Moody outside, he said that Christian Walker's laser off the wall was the hardest hit ball of any of the 4 games yesterday.
I believe it. It was a beam.
And man, I don't know if Walker gets enough credit for just how good he has been. He has 33 home runs this year, 258 average, 103 RBIs. He's been huge for them. They had a solid season, not a great season, but now, they're in a position here to go steal this thing from the Brewers.
About the Twins ending their long drought, 18 years since their last playoff victory with that 3-1 win yesterday over the Blue Jays. It's a long time.
I don't even know how it's possible, especially in baseball. That's a game where the best team doesn't always win. Like a lot of the times, the best team doesn't win. Like it seems statistically certainly improbable. Obviously, it wasn't impossible, but very improbable. Good for them, man. That was a great atmosphere. Like I said earlier, they get the win there, and now you got 4 teams today who have been playing for 162 games, and now will have their season come down to 9 innings.
Yeah, so all 4 of those teams, or all 4 of the games from yesterday, the exact same start times today, have the Rangers and Rays at 3 o'clock on ABC, Blue Jays and Twins, 4:30 on ESPN, Diamondbacks, Brewers, 7 o'clock on ESPN2, and then the Marlins and Phillies round things out once again at 8 o'clock on ESPN. And again, the winner of that series heading on to take on the Braves this upcoming weekend in Game 1 of the NLDS.
Who do y'all want for the Braves? I want to get y'all's take on that.
I mean, I kind of want to just play the Marlins and win it because as great of a story as that would be to beat the Phillies, the Phillies may actually be the 3rd best team in the entire thing.
Yeah, and obviously we saw the Phillies take care of the Braves last year in a pretty similar situation. So I think you match up better with the Marlins. Would you love to beat the Phillies and say that you got one over on them compared to last year? Sure, but I'd take the little bit easier option with the Marlins personally.
Five game series are just scary.
Yeah.
If it was 7, I think.
And again, the Braves with the pitching, it's a little iffy, just like last year. I'd rather take the easy way out not the easy way out, but the easier way out with the Marlins.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's gonna be very tough for the Marlins to win. I had this thought. So game 1 for the Braves, they have to win game 1,
of course,
because the weird thing about another team playing kind of a 2 or 3 game set before they get to you is your number 1. You can still pitch your number 1 if you're the Braves in game 1, obviously.
Yep.
Well, but then as you get into like game 2, and this year, game 1 is on a Saturday, game 2 is on a Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time it gets back around, they can actually pitch Wheeler potentially game 2.
Right.
So it doesn't really delay, this whole hey, you had to play a series, so that messes up your pitching. It does, but not to the extent you might think.
Right. Absolutely. So again, we'll see the Braves in action on Saturday against either the the Marlins or the Phillies, and certainly excited to see what the Gamecocks can continue to do through the postseason as well. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself and Elijah coming up next right here on The Game.
In 1995, veteran police officer Michael Chappell was convicted of armed robbery and murder and has spent the past 30 years in prison. The true crime podcast, In the Land of Lies, explores the untold side to this story, one that could prove Michael Chappell is actually innocent. See why people are calling In the Land of Lies incredible, phenomenal, and a must-hear podcast. Binge the entire series now, and new episodes are coming soon. Imperative Entertainment presents In the Land of Lies. Get the podcast wherever you listen.
This episode is brought to you by Southern Company. Southern Company is making energy clean, smart, and sustainable for their 9 million customers across the country. Southern Company, building the future of energy. Learn more at southerncompany.com/future.
Every Monday, Rich Eisen and Chris Brockman react to what's happening in the world of football on Overreaction Monday.
The AFC North. Mm-hmm. Not all 4 teams are going to make the playoffs.
More likely than not.
More likely than not, right? Okay. And I know they've been the king of this jungle for the last few seasons. The Cincinnati Bengals, Rich, are going to miss the playoffs this year.
This is an overreaction. Bengals are not only making the playoffs, they're winning this division. Oh, again, for a 3rd straight year.
Overreaction Monday, the podcast, wherever you listen. Susie Schuster and Amy Trask present offbeat conversations and expert sports commentary as they ask, what the football?
When my family found out how long it took me to figure out why Charles Woodson named his wine Intercept, they said, there's a reason that you had trouble in school.
Not everyone knows, when they think of a bottle of Intercept, they don't know that I play football.
Well, what I've learned is a smooth defensive back can make smooth wine.
That's what it's all about.
What the Football with Susie Schuster and Amy Trask. The podcast is available Tuesdays, wherever you listen.